there's very little difference between strangling somebody and actually killing them.
Tell me your address, okay? I want to help you. It's not okay.
No, it's not helping me. Nothing helps me. You guys, he hit me so hard in the left side of my head, I can't hear.
The first time he abused you, that was I can't believe the words that we were talking about. I can't believe 5 days before your wedding day, right? That's unbelievable.
There was one final beating where I was unconscious for most of it. He kept on strangling me and doing many other awful things to me. And I could feel it that he was going to kill me. So what happened to me afterwards is I just gradually had to realize that I was never going to let myself down again. That I would never allow myself to be abused in any way. And I'm really happy to say that I have kept that vow.
Leslie, thank you so much for coming on the show today. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on. I hope you're well. You're all the way across some sea. I don't know what sea it is that separates us, but you're away from me. Yeah. But we're together in spirit. First of all, how are you?
I am great. I'm here in Washington, D.C., the capital of the United States. It's rainy. And I'm happy, as always, to be talking about relationship violence and how to prevent it and end it.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like quite an interesting statement, right? Because you're happy to talk about relationship and abuse, and especially, we'll get into it, but when you've experienced it yourself, why is that? Why is it so important that you talk about it?
Because abuse thrives only in silence, and so talking about it is my and everybody's superpower. It's the way that we end it. It's just by talking about it. And I was an abuse victim in my early 20s, and since then, I've written a memoir, Crazy Love, about it, and I did a TED Talk about why victims stay, and I spend most of my life talking to other victims, men and women and children, about how damaging abuse is, how misunderstood it is, and how we can all prevent it.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get all your links and stuff like that in the description so they can check it all out. But hopefully, you guys do get some sort of idea of what Leslie is all about here today, and obviously then you'll go and follow her up in your own personal life and her story as well. So I want to ask you a question just to open up with. Now, often I do this little jibber jabber, how are you, nice to see you, but I want to get straight into it. You say that one of the most damaging and not offensive, but one of the most damaging questions that people ask is, why didn't you leave? Now, because you say that is, it almost puts the blame on the victim and the survivor. But Leslie, why didn't you leave? Or rather, how did your partner manipulate you into getting you to stay?
Okay. So the reason that the question is so offensive to me and to other victims is that there's one word that you left out that people almost always include, and they say, Leslie, why didn't you just leave?
Right.
As if leaving is really easy. And it just shows that people have really not thought about it at all. Because we all know that ending any kind of relationship is not easy. It's really complicated. And you don't walk out the door one day, whether the person who's hurting you is your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your husband, your wife, your mother, your father, or your own child. These relationships are very complicated, and there's a mix of good and bad. And often you pity the person who's hurting you, which I know is really hard to wrap your head around. But I felt really sorry for my husband. He had been terribly abused as a little boy. When he wasn't abusing me and holding loaded guns to my head and doing awful things to me, he was a very sympathetic and charming man, and I truly loved him. And it's really, if you have a big heart, it's hard to abandon somebody. And it was only when I realized that he was going to kill me if I stayed that I was able to leave. It really was that severe. And it takes the average victim 7 attempts at leaving before he or she can actually leave. It's a very intense and complicated process. And then you add on things like, abusers are very good at getting you to be psychologically dependent on them, financially dependent, geographically, They often threaten to hurt you if you leave, or kill you, or kill themselves. If you have children or pets, they very often threaten to kill them, and quite a lot of the time they carry through on it. So it's a potentially lethal situation to leave an abuser, and we victims know that. And what is really important is that the public knows it too, that our neighbors, our families, police officers, family court judges, that everybody knows how dangerous it is to leave, and that nobody just leaves. It takes a lot of planning and a lot of community support and protection.
Yeah. You say that, were you aware of the fact that he, I mean, we'll get into your story. You can go back to the beginning a little bit later, but I enjoy getting straight into it, you know. Were you aware that it would be dangerous if you were to leave? Or were you so wrapped up in what you call crazy love that actually you didn't see the situation in its full context?
That's exactly right. I was in a lot of denial, as so many victims are. I didn't think that I was an abused wife. I didn't think he was abusing me. I thought that I was a strong, smart, independent woman in love with a really troubled man who I wanted to help. I had no idea that what he was doing to me was a crime. And I promise he did not know that either. You know, we were really enmeshed in what felt like love with a lot of drama and violence mixed in, but it still felt like love. And I didn't know at a conscious level how dangerous it was to leave him. I think at an unconscious level, I did know. I did know that he was that desperate, that he would really try to hurt me or hurt himself if I ended the relationship. And in fact, he did. When I finally ended the relationship, he had a complete breakdown. And he stalked me and threatened me for a long time, which is also very common.
Wow, I mean, should we wrap up there? like, do you know what I mean? Like that you...
Oh, it's really simple, right? In so many ways, it's very simple, the situation. It's complicated, but it's also really simple. And you can see why I needed so much help to leave. I needed my friends and family. I needed a divorce attorney. I needed a domestic violence advocate. I needed a sympathetic family court judge. I needed sympathetic police officers. I needed a locksmith to change my locks.
Yeah.
I needed so much help and protection from my community. And the reason I'm here today and I'm able to speak out is that I got it. I got all of that support. I was very fortunate. But so many people don't get that support. People don't believe us, or they blame us. They think we provoked it. They feel sorry for the abuser. They get angry at us that we've gone back again and again. And that's another reason I speak out, is to just increase sympathy for victims, because we really need it. We might look really tough and strong from the outside, and we might look stupid from the outside, that we're going back and again, but we need a lot of help in order to end this. And frankly, abusers need help too. They often were victims as children, and they need a lot of support and understanding too. They need to be held accountable for their actions, but they need sympathy as well.
Well, I was going to ask, actually, it's interesting you bring that up now, that I was going to ask, how do you feel about your ex-husband now? But also, the thing is, as you say, you and again, I always come into these episodes going, I've done my research, so I apologise to the viewers if there's a slight bit of prior knowledge to your story. But, you say that he was, abused as a child, and that these things often, you see it with sexual abuse and physical abuse, often when a child has experienced that, they go on to do that themselves, whether it be to gain some sort of extra control again, or for whatever reason. But does that mean that, the question I'm trying to ask is, do you blame him, or is it something that happened to him that made him do that?
I would say both. I don't blame him for being an abuse victim. He was a little child when it started. And when I say that he was abused, I don't mean that he was spanked occasionally. His stepfather broke his nose, broke his arm, broke his ribs, broke his collarbone. Connor was in the hospital starting from age 4. Several times a year for at least 10 years. And his mother was beaten in front of him, which is a terrible thing to do to a child. So that piece of it is not his fault. And I feel a lot of pity for him and a lot of sympathy. But when you become an adult, you become responsible for your actions. And Connor did not act responsible for his actions. He didn't apologize. He didn't seek therapy. He didn't seek help. He blamed me, and he blamed the world. And so that's where I don't blame him for what happened, but I do hold him responsible. And I think it's a fine line, but a very important line. And I also want to say that I think the fact that I felt sorry for him was a very manipulative thing that he did. I think he did that intentionally. He wanted me to feel sorry for him. And I think that abusers do this. Now, I don't know about you, but as an adult, I don't want anybody to feel sorry for me. I actually hate pity. Most emotionally secure people do, because pity is an uncomfortable feeling. So it's a real red flag if you're in a relationship with another adult and they repeatedly insist that you feel sorry for them. That's a huge red flag that you're in an abusive relationship. And it's one of the most subtle ones, so I always try to point it out for people to see. Some of the other red flags are extreme possessiveness, a desire to control and dominate your actions, what you wear, who you see, how you spend your time. Because abuse is not really about violence per se, it's about controlling the other person. Yeah. Because if you look at it from my ex's standpoint, he had been abandoned and betrayed by everybody in his life when he was a little child. Yeah. His mother, his stepfather, all the adults. And so he didn't want that to ever happen again. And he loved me and he trusted me. And so he didn't want me to leave him. He wanted to control me so that I would never leave him. And ironically, by abusing me, he guaranteed that I would leave him. So this is another reason why I think we need to understand how complicated this is, because you've got to help abusers unpack all of this, or they're never going to stop abusing. They're just going to keep on finding new victims. And there's an endless supply of new victims, big-hearted people who are willing to give an abuser another chance, just like I was.
Yeah. Do you think that abusers can be helped to the point where they're like to change as a person, whether that's not them anymore, or is it in them fundamentally?
Oh, no, I think they can be helped, definitely. Maybe not all of them. It's a spectrum disorder. And the people at the extreme end who, have murdered many partners, those people, I think, probably cannot be helped. But the average abuser can be helped. But what's hard to understand is that there are so few people trained to help them. Yeah. They need therapy. They need real anger management support groups with other people who are abusers. And also, I think that it's really exciting, some of the work that's being done with plant-based medicines and other psychedelic drugs to help abusers get at the root of their trauma, because they're in denial too. They're very much in denial that they're working out childhood patterns. And if anything can be done to help them see that, then I think that they can change their behavior.
Yeah. If we go back to the beginning then, Leslie, as I said at the beginning of this interview, you've got... I don't know what the right word is, Leslie, because amazing isn't the right word. Unbelievable story, I think, is maybe the unbelievable or fascinating or important, I think, is what I messaged you, right? You've got an important story because although it's one that we all wish that never happened, it's so important that story is told because, as you say, abuse thrives in silence, and so we need to sort of dead that silence, right? We need to get rid of that silence, so it's important that it gets told. But if we go to the beginning then, how did you meet Connor? A little bit about your childhood, what you were like as a person.
Well, the first thing I would say is that my story is actually really typical. Anybody can be abused, no matter what your background, the family you grew up in, your religion, where you live, your education, your income level. Abuse is incredibly common. What was unusual about me is that I just defy the stereotypes. I went to Harvard University. I've always had good jobs. I went to Wharton Business School at the University of Pennsylvania. You'd think, oh, she's smart, she's independent, she's not going to be a victim. But anybody can be a victim. And my story is that I grew up in Washington, D.C., where I live now. My dad was a lawyer. My mom was a teacher. I grew up in many ways, a completely normal family. There was no violence in my family. There was alcoholism, and a lot of it. And alcoholism is kind of similar to abuse in that it's committed by somebody who you love. They change their personality. And also it's the type of thing that you're supposed to hide from the rest of the world in order to protect the alcoholic. So in some ways I was very comfortable with this whole idea of what happens behind closed doors is supposed to stay behind closed doors. Yeah. But that's about it in terms of what set me up. I met Connor in New York City right after I'd graduated from college. He had just graduated as well from another Ivy League school. We both had really good jobs. We were, we fell in love, and there was a lot that was really appealing about him and me and us as a couple. And I think if you had looked at us, you would have said, oh, no. They're poised to have a very happy life together, a very successful life together. There's so much kindness and a lot of very good values between us. But it was when you start digging into his background that he had been so violently abused as a kid that I think the red flags start to come up. And he, from very early on in the relationship, he showed a lot of typical signs of being abusive. But I was so naive because I didn't know anything about abuse that I missed all of them. And they were all disguised as love, which is why I call the book Crazy Love. It all seemed like love. You know, he would say to me, well, you know, my last girlfriend cheated on me, and so I just really need to know where you're going to be tonight. And also, I'd really preferred if men from your past didn't call you, even if they were friends of yours. You know, and he would make it sound like, okay, I have to feel so sorry for him. He had this terrible last relationship. I've got to make it up to him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It was very, very manipulative. But the problem is that when you're in love with somebody and they start manipulating you, you don't see it as manipulation. You can't. It just feels like love. It feels like you're being so good and strong and taking care of this person and showing them how much you love them. And I think at the beginning of an abusive relationship, it's almost exactly identical to a really great beginning of a typical romantic relationship. And it's very hard to tell what's going on, which is another reason I try to talk about this, to try to get people to understand that a key in a relationship is to go slowly and to look for these warning signs.
Yeah, you talk about as well the stages of domestic abuse, and I think that's a really nice narrative that you have. It's a really nice way of structuring your talks in the past, and so I want to go through that a little bit today. Stage one, what is that? Could you tell us a little bit about the stages of domestic abuse?
The first stage is always a fairy tale romance. Every single victim will tell you this, and the details might be a little bit different based on your particular story, but it always is that the abuser makes you feel like the most special person on earth, that you're so special and you're so wonderful. And it really, there's nothing about it that feels fake or overkill. It really, to me, it felt like I had finally met the person I had been looking my whole life for. You know, this person who understood me inside and out and could see into my heart and soul and cared for me so much. It was intoxicating. Looking back, I feel like it felt like mainlining heroin. You know, it was that powerful. So that's the fairy tale stage. The next stage is always isolation, because it's a lot easier to abuse somebody if they're isolated from their friends and family and coworker. So what you'll see at this stage is that the abuser asks you to move somewhere far away, or asks you to quit your job to help take care of them, or asks you to have a baby with them, because that's a really effective way to isolate somebody and make them dependent. So the isolation happens. It can be geographic, physical, financial. There are lots of ways to isolate somebody. Psychologically is a way to do it too. And then you introduce the threat of abuse. Often, you know, the abuser will punch a wall or hit a table, or, you know, say something like, you know, you've made me so angry with what you've done. If I weren't such a gentleman, or if I didn't love you so much, I would hit you.
And was he doing all these sorts of things to yourself?
Yep, he was doing that to me. He was introducing a threat of abuse. And just sort of the subtle, and maybe not so subtle, erosion of my self-esteem. He would say, you know, after this fairy tale of I was the most perfect, wonderful, beautiful, smart woman he'd ever dated, he would say things like, you know, that skirt is really short. I think, you know, people are going to think you're a slut if you wear that. Things like that was like, it just took me so by surprise. Like, how would he say that to me? Or other things that were even more subtle, where he'd say, you know, you're so beautiful. I don't think you really need to wear makeup. I would actually prefer it if you didn't wear any makeup. And it was like, what? You know, it starts getting so confusing when they do things. And then there were a couple of other there was one red flag that I can't believe that I ignored. It was just because I was naive. And that was that one night during sex, he strangled me.
Wow. And
it was very erotic to him and terrifying to me. And I had a very, very vanilla upbringing. And I didn't know anybody who did that. And it obviously had turned him on a lot. And I was so confused, and it made me sick to my stomach. It really frightened me. But I didn't know what to do about it. So I didn't do anything. I didn't say anything. And then he started getting very possessive, and then he wanted me to leave New York City and quit my job and move to another state, and I agreed to do that. And then it just started. And then as soon as the first time he full on attacked me was 5 days before our wedding, and he strangled me again. And strangulation is a really huge red flag because there's very little difference between strangling somebody and actually killing them. It's like about 30 seconds.
Wow.
And so he could have easily killed me any of those times, but I didn't know any of that. And I just thought it was really disturbing and weird, and that it, rightly so, I thought it had to do with his childhood, that he had been so abused. And I didn't realize that he was inflicting the same kind of abuse on me. I really felt so badly for him that he was doing this. I felt badly for him that he was strangling me.
Wow.
That's crazy love. And I married him anyway. He beat me twice more on our honeymoon, and then he got guns, and it just became, my life went from being this wonderful, fairy tale to being a nightmare. And it happened so fast that I had no idea really what had happened. And it just got worse from there. And I hid it from everybody.
How did you hide it?
How did I hide it? I didn't tell people. I covered up the bruises with makeup. I hid it by not telling anybody, by keeping the silence. It wasn't that I was ashamed. It was that I wanted to protect him. I knew he'd get in trouble if I told people. And I knew people would make me leave, and I didn't want to leave him. I loved him. I wanted the abuse to end, but I didn't want the relationship to end. So I didn't tell anybody. And I could have. I could have told anybody at any time. There was a retired sheriff who lived 2 doors down from me. I had neighbors, I had friends and family, and I didn't tell anyone. And I got really, really lucky because 2 people very close to me noticed that something had changed in me, that my personality had fundamentally changed. And they confronted me about it. And thank God I told them the truth about what was happening. And also thank God they were kind about it. They didn't blame me. They believed me. And it took me a long time to leave after that. But once I had told people, those 2 friends, that's how I was able to leave. Is that I had 2 people who knew what was happening. It wasn't a secret anymore. And I slowly was able to break down my own denial and to admit how potentially lethal this situation was, and that I couldn't have children with him, and that I was paying an enormous price for it. And that enabled me to talk to him about it. Not very much, because it's very dangerous and risky and unpleasant to talk to an abuser about this. But I was able to talk to him about it and to tell him that I was going to leave him if he kept on doing it. And so then, when he kept on doing it, I realized that I had to leave. And it got worse. The abuse always gets worse over time. It never, ever gets better.
Yeah. You mentioned, if we go back a little bit to your the first time he abused you, that was 5... I can't believe the words that we were talking about. I can't believe 5 days before your wedding day, right? That's unbelievable. Do you think that he almost felt that because the wedding was so soon that he almost he had trapped you? You were his. Like he had isolated you.
Yeah, that's a very insightful observation. That is exactly it. And what domestic violence advocates see over and over again is that the first really violent episode often happens right at the time of a major commitment. That you've moved in together, you've gotten engaged, you're getting married, you've gotten pregnant, he's adopted your children, that sort of thing. And I think it's for 2 reasons. One is that I think those commitment steps trigger abusers. It's really frightening for them. And also, they know that it's going to be a lot harder for you to leave. And he absolutely knew it was harder for me to leave. And it was harder for me to leave.
Yeah, and then again on your honeymoon, no red flags?
I mean, there were so many red flags when I look back now. And if you were to read Crazy Love, there would be times where you would yell at the book. You'd say, leave now. I mean, that's what I do when I read.
It's so easy to say though, that, isn't it? Because that's the whole thing of, sorry to cut you off, but that's the whole thing of why you talk in the way you do about, your TED Talk about why women don't leave their abusers, because it's so frustrating to look at times and you think, oh, why not? But it's so much easier said than done, isn't it? And you say, you're wrapped up in this crazy love, and as you say, you almost felt like you were the only. I'm sorry, I've done a lot of research on Leslie before this, and I don't love Leslie's story, but I love the way you talk about it. And so I've heard you say in the past that you felt like you were the only woman, the strong, intelligent, which you are, woman that could save him from his past, and that you make sacrifices when you've met your soulmate, right? And I think it's so true. That's how you feel, and Yeah, sorry.
Men feel that way as well as women, and men are abused all the time too, sometimes physically, but definitely emotionally. And it's what our culture says love is supposed to feel like, that you're supposed to want to do anything for the person. And you become very vulnerable when you feel that way. And I think that we don't teach healthy love enough in any of our societies, the healthy versus unhealthy red flags. And what I know now is that real love is quiet and calm. It makes you feel safe and loved, and you get to control the pace. You get to control when you make the commitment. There's very little drama. And I didn't know that at the time because I thought love was supposed to be really dramatic and it was supposed to be fireworks. And I just don't think that any of that's really true for men or women over time. And I think that I'm so glad that you're talking about this, and I'm so glad that you're a man talking about this, because we need to have men understand how dangerous this is, and that they are part of the problem, they are part of the solution, and also they often can be victims too. And, it's just as frustrating talking to a male victim who gives a woman, an abusive woman, yet another turn. Or, there are lots of gay and lesbian couples that are in abusive relationship. It happens to everybody. And the details might be different, but the feelings are the same. And it's why I really like talking about it, and why I'm so honored to talk to you about it, because it just happens to everybody. And I'm so lucky that I got out. I'm lucky that I had so much support to get out. But the first thing that I did, that I was able to do, that I recommend to anybody, is to talk about it, to find somebody who you can trust and talk to them about it. And if you have somebody in your life who you think is being abused or whose personality has changed since they got into a relationship, just very gently say to them, hey, it seems like something's changed, that you're not as happy as you used to be, and that you're scared and you're uncomfortable around your partner. And I need you to know I love you and I want to help you if anything's wrong, but this is not love. Love is not supposed to make you feel that way.
Was that the turning point for you? Because that was what I was going to ask. Is there anything that people's friends and families can do to help someone? For you, was it the turning point when your friends went, Leslie, are you all right? Like, are you okay? Was that the turning point, or? That
was a turning point that helped me a lot, but truly the turning point for me when I decided that I had to leave him no matter what, no matter how much it hurt and how far sorry for him I felt, was there was one final beating where I was unconscious for most of it. He kept on strangling me and doing many other awful things to me. And I could feel it that he was going to kill me. And there's no feeling on earth like that. And it's very persuasive. And I loved him, but I loved myself too. And so I chose myself over him. And you're not taught to do that, especially as a woman. But anybody in love is supposed to feel like, oh, you're supposed to put the other person first. And it was a really powerful thing for me to say, I'm not going to put him first. I'm going to put me first. And that's why I'm here today, lucky enough, all these years later, having totally rebuilt my life, having a very, very happy life, free, totally free.
Once you had left him, we've talked about it being a potentially dangerous decision. Or often is a dangerous decision, not even potentially. It can very often be a very dangerous decision. How scared were you? Were you paranoid? Where did you go, Leslie? How did you get rid of this guy that was abusing you?
I stayed in our apartment. I had the locks changed. I was very careful. I told everybody, my neighbors, I was in business school at the time, my professors, my classmates, my friends and family, the police. Everybody knew that I was in danger. So everybody was looking out for me. And then as soon as I could, I moved hundreds of miles away so that it would be a lot harder for him to find me. And I got lucky and I got out and I was able to rebuild my life.
Yeah. When do you have issues with the trust? Because I think again, I apologize to the audience for knowing things before they do. But you've talked about before about how you used to love men in the way that, you always trusted men.
I love men. I trust men. I picked the one wrong one. Yeah. And that's important to note. It's not that all men are bad. They definitely aren't. There are a lot of great men out there. It's not that I needed to learn how to trust men again.
Yeah.
I needed to learn how to trust myself again. Because I really let myself down by allowing myself to stay in an abusive relationship. And no one deserves to abuse anybody else in the name of love or family or anything else. And so what happened to me afterwards is I just gradually had to realize that I was never going to let myself down again. That I would never allow myself to be abused in any way. And I'm really happy to say that I have kept that vow.
Yeah.
And I've ended lots of other relationships because I felt like they were abusive.
Yeah.
And I have to say, I've done abusive things myself too. Everybody does. It's
Yeah.
just sort of part of being human and imperfect. But if you talk about it and learn about it, there's a lot of chance that we can all end this together. So I'm so grateful that you took the time to do this, and that your listeners
Thank you.
are listening, and it's wonderful. And I'm sure you're going to put up, but my website is Leslie Books.
Yeah.
I have one email address there that anybody can email me. And I'm on social media. I'm really easy to find, and I love talking about this, and I'd love to continue the conversation with you and with everybody who is listening to us right now.
Absolutely, Leslie. First of all, I know you've got to go, so thank you so much for coming on the show. I hope everyone has enjoyed that show. It's been amazing to hear your story, and I hope to follow your story in the future and sort of look forward to things that you go and do. And because that's the most important thing, right? These are moments in people's lives, but you can, like yourself, come out of them and go on and live happy lives. You've got a family now, and you're a successful, amazing woman who I'm sure will go on to be fantastic in the future. And that's the message, isn't it? You guys at home can go, if you are being abused at the moment or an abuser, you can change your life around. Things can work for you. So
there's so much hope, and that's
Yeah.
a great point to end on. So thank you so much. To be continued.
Exactly. Thank you guys so much for watching. Subscribe. Make sure to subscribe, like the video as well, and we'll see you guys in the next episode. Ta-da!